Okay, you can begin.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Um, Today's presentation will be done by Saskia Laffoon, Anika Badri, and Rhonda Galston. And our chapter is Courage and Moral Leadership. Next slide, please. So this chapter focuses on the third element, which is spirit, and it focuses on the ability to look within, to contemplate the human condition, to think about what is right and wrong, to see what really matters in the world, and to have the courage to stand up for what is worthy and right. Next slide, please. So we're going to watch a video right now.
What does it mean to be an effective ethical leader? It means at least two things. First, effective ethical leaders act ethically as an inspiration to others. No single factor has a bigger impact on the ethicality of firm culture than the personal examples set by firm leaders. Second, they communicate and manage their organization's culture so as to promote ethical action by subordinates.
Most of my managers have always been very ethical, and I've always looked up to their leadership, but one in particular stood out from the others in that she was always looking for other people's perspectives. How is this going to impact other people? What are the downstream impacts of this decision that we're going to make? And is it truly the right one for our company, for our stakeholders, and our client teams?
Professors Cropenzano and Wallumbwa have observed that most adults do not have an adequate moral compass, and therefore look outside themselves for guidance in moral dilemma situations. It is the leaders of their organizations to whom they primarily look. And studies show that few things impact the ethical climate of a firm more than the actions of their leaders. Importantly, leaders' unethical actions are copied by subordinates even more readily than their ethical actions.
When you have an unethical boss that is always trying to bend the rules or even break them, that is creating a toxic environment for everybody in the institution because more and more people will try to do the same thing.
Although it is especially important for leaders to act ethically, they are often particularly vulnerable to acting unethically. Professors Tenbrunsel and Bazerman note that it is clear that most people have high opinions of their own character and do not realize the substantial gap between how ethical they think they are and how ethical they truly are.
Like, for example, I worked for a doctor in a small practice, and he had a very colorful personality, but he was also very unethical about a lot of things because it was just him, and he was the boss. And sometimes he would disclose really personal information about patients to other patients and to us. They think that they are overconfident that they're ethical, and really they're not, or what they're doing is not wrong. They rationalize themselves out of it anyways because, you know, for the doctor I worked for, he was a doctor, and so he did lots of good things. So it's okay that he did these things. Or, you know, he was more educated than all of us, so he knew what he was talking about, and none of us knew.
Believing that we are moral people and will automatically do moral things, many of us act with little self-reflection and thereby often make ethical mistakes. Overconfidence renders leaders particularly vulnerable because they have typically had great success in their lives. Think of Ken Lay, former CEO of Enron, minister's son, noted philanthropist, convicted felon. Or think of disgraced lobbyist Jack Abramoff, devout Jew, devoted family man, convicted felon. Another behavioral factor that particularly affects leaders is the instant entitlement bias. Studies show that if people are told that they are part of a team and that they should divide up resources allocated to the team, they tend to divide the resources equally among team members. But if they are told that they have been selected as the leader of the team, they tend to keep a much larger share of the resources for themselves.
Yay!
In real life, leaders often fall victim to the instant entitlement bias as can be seen in the lavish lifestyles often lived by corporate bigwigs. Think of former Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski, who spent $2 million of company money on his wife's birthday party.
It's really easy to serve in one's self-interest when you're in a position of power.
If your decisions have always been supported and you've always been praised for being a fantastic leader and increasing the value of the firm, it could feel like you can do no wrong in the eyes of the firm. It could be hard for you to slow down and think about whether you could have made a better decision or whether the decisions you are making are truly ethical and in the best interest of the firm and your own value structure, the culture of the company and your own personal values.
A study by Professors Flynn and Wiltermuth demonstrated that people at the center of social networks, such as CEOs, are more likely than others to mistakenly believe that other people agree with them regarding what is an ethical course of action. It is often shocking how top corporate officers, like WorldCom's Bernie Ebbers, and high government officials, like New York's Eliot Spitzer, come to the view that the rules that apply to everyone else do not apply to them. For example, when Ken Lay was found to have violated Enron's code of ethics by investing in a company that did more than 80% of its business with Enron, he called suggestions of impropriety form over substance. Rules, he said, are important, but you should not be a slave to rules either.
I had a boss that would always try to embezzle money and also try to force a number of young people, young volunteers in the institution to make loans with fake papers and to take the money, and he presented everything as being done for the greater good for the organization. The higher people go up the chain, the more likely they are to do illegal stuff because they think nobody's going to catch them.
Professor Dr. Keltner of the University of California at Berkeley, who studies ethical leadership, further finds that leaders are often tone deaf on ethical issues, and that they have uniquely self-serving rationalizations for their unethical actions that often focus on their rights and crowd out any consideration of others' rights. As Professor Zach notes, achieving high social status appears to make it not just lonely at the top, but morally perilous as well.
When people talk about power corrupting, it doesn't have to. Only if you are not aware that your actions have consequences in networks around you, right?
That you can't put a price on doing the right thing.
Realize what's important, what's moral, and question your actions to make sure that all the decisions you're making are leading to an objective that is ethical.
I think if a leader sets a tone that they've never made a mistake, they don't struggle with anything, they're perfect, then, I mean, that's not realistic. But then how can people come to them when they're feeling less than perfect?
The best leaders are the ones who acknowledge their own shortcomings, acknowledge that they do not know everything, and ask those who they serve and ask those who work for them just to fill them in on what's happening. The best companies are the ones that create a culture where the employees can voice their concerns to their bosses, really.
Okay, so you all understood everything that happened in this video. You all have any questions?
No, it was clear.
Okay, so anybody has any experiences they want to share in the workplace displaying unethical or even ethical leaderships from your bosses or superiors? Anybody?
I guess where I worked before, I had a manager. Like they were very strict with like using company things or taking company things, like if you needed it. But like for myself and my colleagues, but they were very like frivolous when it came to themselves. So they would like use things for their own personal gain, take things, etc., etc. I can't really think of
Thank you
anything
very
else.
much.
I think so. Yeah, I
Yes.
think that.
Hi,
Thank you,
Rhonda.
Sherry. Yes.
Hi. So this is Janelle. So I just want to share that one of the companies where I worked for, now my field is accounts, and I am very strict with, the accounting laws and all these things. And where I worked, I had issues, especially with my bosses, where they wanted me to sign off on documents, tax documents, that were not accurate, right? And that is very unethical. I explained to them that, that's not the right thing to do. But when you're trying to reduce taxes, some bosses, they do all that they could to reduce taxes, but it's really not, it's not right, right? But therefore, someone else who was willing to do it, because at the end of the day, I believe and I stand with what is correct at the end of the day.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Let's move on to the next slide. In 2013, Justice Cookram speaks on the need for ethics in the way business is conducted in Trinidad and Tobago. And he says, we have seen how corrupt practices have become part of our society. We are losing the meaning of building culture of corporate responsibility. There must be the recognition we do not wield power or influence in isolated spheres. We are all connected. We must create ethos of corporate responsibility, or what I call conscionable capitalism. So he also speaks on, well, he later mentions the CL financial collapse. So does anybody remember the CL financial collapse, specifically what happened with Clico?
No, sorry.
Okay. So the
I
organization
have
had a
I have a vague idea of what had happened, but
okay.
what I remembered was this woman taking out all of her money. Like she got the S, and she and her family had went and take out all of their money, and she was in government at the time. That's what I remember. So it was like they knew people was going down, and they had told their families to go and take out the money, and they let the public just stay.
Right.
I think that was
Somebody else?
Karen Nunes Teixeira, the then finance minister.
Okay. So the organization had a heavy reliance on borrowed money. In a report, it stated that in 2007, bank borrowings were 19 times the size of core capital. And this is compared with capital adequacy's guidelines as set out by the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, where capital is meant to act as a buffer and absorb the initial shock of losses. So many people were affected by what Clico did, and this financial institution was in breach of many core principles. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to do an activity with you all, and this is a mostly true, mostly false answering. So I want you all to record these answering. As I say a statement, you would put mostly true, mostly false. So the first one, overall, it is better to be humble and honest than to be successful and dishonest.
Mostly true.
But I want you to let's say down loud what recorded
Oh, sorry.
for later.
Sorry.
This person must be That's okay. Right. So number two, if you trust someone completely, you are asking for trouble. 3, A leader should take action only when it is morally right. So mostly true, mostly false. 4. A good way to handle people is to tell them what they like to hear. 5. There's no excuse for telling a white lie to someone. 6. It makes sense to flatter important people. 7. Most people who get ahead as leaders have led very moral lives. 8. It is better to not tell people the real reason you did something unless it benefits you to do so. 9. The vast majority of people are brave, good, and kind. Let's repeat it. And 10, it is hard to get to the top without something cutting corners. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to give you instructions now. So you're going to give yourself 1 point each for each of these false answers, mostly false answer to statements 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And you're going to give yourself 1 point for each mostly true answer to 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And now you're going to add up your score.
Can you just say that again? How we assigning the points?
Okay, so we're giving yourself 1 point for each mostly false answer to statements 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And you're going to give yourself 1 point for each mostly true answer to 2, 4, 6, and 10. So everyone has their score? Hi, y'all hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I will give you some background information before I discuss your scoring. And these statements came from the works of Niccolo Machiavelli, an Italian political philosopher who wrote The Prince in 1513 to describe how a prince can retain control of his kingdom. So from 8 to 10 points, it is a high max score. From 4 to 7 points, it's a moderate max score, and a 0 to 3 points is a low max score. So during Machiavelli's time, a successful politician was believed to require behaviors that today would be considered ego-centered and manipulative. So a high max score today does not really mean a sinister or vicious person, but probably means the person has a cool detachment, sees life as a game, and is not personally engaged with people. So anybody want to share their score?
My score is 4.
Okay. Okay, well, you have a, that's a moderate max score, right? All right. So that's it. Nobody else want to share their score? Anybody got a high max score? I'm curious.
I got 4 as well.
Okay. Okay, so tell me, do you think that the Prime Minister will have a high, moderate, or low mark score? Are you all hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
We determined us using the questions you had previously, right?
Yes. So a high mark score, as I said before, would be a person who is seen as in the man see life as a game and is not personally engaged with people. So that's the high mark score. So if you think a low mark score, that is with somebody who is the opposite of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you all think the president has a high, low, or medium mark score? Of Trinidad and Tobago, the president of Trinidad and Tobago. Does he have a high, or moderate mark score, or low mark score?
I would like to say moderate.
Okay. And what about Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bissessa? Anyone? A high, moderate, or low mark score?
Moderate to high.
Moderate to high. Okay. And what about Watson Duke?
No comment.
No comment. Okay. 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 So next slide, please. We're watching another video.
Ethical leaders both act ethically as an inspiration to others and communicate and manage their organization's culture so as to promote ethical action. So, how does a leader effectively communicate and manage an organization's culture to create ethical action?
I think effective leaders lead by example, and that's sort of setting the tone.
The most important attribute of being an effective leader is cultivating a self-awareness.
Respect for other people.
They know they are responsible for a group of people.
Well, leaders must establish their organization's ethical norms. They must ask, what does our organization stand for? They should set high expectations. Leaders must also effectively communicate to others both the contents of those ethical norms and the intensity of the organization's commitment to upholding them. The careful drafting, with input from others in their organization, of a code of ethics can be helpful. Then, leaders must implement employment practices consistent with these overall goals. Of course, they must hire good people and punish those who violate the organization's ethical norms. Just as importantly, they must reward those whose conduct embodies the organization's ethical standards.
You can all agree that you have these core values in your company and maybe put some posters on the wall, but if you never have to talk about it and figure out how it relates to your actual day-to-day work, then it's all fluff.
It turns out that leaders can use psychological knowledge to nudge employees to act more ethically. So, leaders should keep in mind, people are more likely to steal from their firms or mistreat their firm's customers if they feel as though they themselves have been mistreated.
As the leader, it is your responsibility to put others ahead of you sometimes. You want them to be very happy and to feel very good about the work that they're doing on a constant basis.
Leaders must explain the reasons for taking the actions that they take, for that helps employees accept decisions, even if they disagree with them. Also, studies show that employees are more likely to act unethically if they are exhausted. So to overwork employees is to court disaster. Relatedly, people tend to act less ethically if they are under acute time pressure. So this is another reason to be reasonable in placing demands upon employees. Professors Margolis and Malinsky studied several organizations and found that some wisely built into their processes time for pauses and second looks.
So in hyper-competitive environments, there's incentives to be number one or incentives to be at the top of your class or at the top of sales or whatever the case may be. And because of those incentives, people will do whatever they need to do.
Remember, employees naturally focus upon goals that are set for them by superiors. If unrealistic goals are set, especially those that carry punishments for failing to meet them, or extravagant rewards for exceeding them, then employees will tend to lose focus on the ethical aspects of their actions. They will concentrate entirely on meeting the goal. Realistic goals and moderate rewards for meeting them are a good combination.
Really having a set follow-up schedule in terms of making sure that everyone's on the same page from an ethical perspective is hugely important.
You may not have considered this, but the evidence is clear that people are more likely to act unethically if they find themselves in a dirty or cluttered workplace, or if they find themselves in a dimly lit space. Cleanliness and good lighting can go a long way toward fostering ethical behavior.
I was in a company that was, very ethically sound. It was definitely an open space. It was an office without cubicles. We were in a big building and there were hundreds of employees with no cubicles, and so that just encouraged more conversations and more interaction.
Finally, studies show that employees will tend to act more ethically if they are frequently reminded of the importance to the firm of living up to its espoused values. Effective leaders create legends that illustrate commitment to the firm's culture. For decades, accounting firm Arthur Andersen was the most admired accounting firm in the world, in part because of its employees' belief in the origin story of how founder Arthur Andersen told a large client that there was not enough money in Chicago to induce him to fudge the numbers. Unfortunately, the leaders of Andersen forgot this lesson and started emphasizing revenue over character, which is why the firm no longer exists.
If we are in a position of power, if we are in a position of leadership, it's simply not enough to just have the title of leadership. We have to assume that challenge, right?
It's easy to say what you're doing, but you actually need to talk the talk and walk the walk.
While there is no single correct way to create and foster an ethical organizational culture, committed leaders will benefit by keeping these points in mind and by remembering that all their actions send messages.
Lead by example. You have to show them what you want done and how you want it done based on your own actions. That way, even in the cases where you're not around, they can say, okay, what would so-and-so do?
If you really want to build a company where people are going to rally behind a shared set of values, you have to make people talk about it and relate it to their day-to-day work.
The organizational culture that supports gut feeling, that supports thinking before action, can significantly raise the possibility of more ethical and moral decisions.
Okay, so here we have the characteristics of an unethical leader as well as an ethical leader. So the unethical leader is arrogant and self-serving, excessively promotes self-interest, practices deception, breaches agreements, deals unfairly, shifts blame to others, diminishes others' dignity, neglects follower development, withholds help and support, and lacks courage to confront unjust acts. And well, the ethical leader is the opposite. possesses humility, maintains concern for the greater good, is honest and straightforward, fulfills commitments, strives for fairness, takes responsibility, shows respect for each individual, encourages and develops others, serves others, and shows courage to stand up for what is right. Next slide, please. Okay, so most organizations would have a code of ethics for its members to follow, and I have here an example of the Trans World Entertainment Corporation's general statement of policy. And they have here honesty and candor is our activities, including observances of the spirit, as well as the letter of the law, avoidance of conflict between personal interests and the interests of the company, or even the appearance of such conflicts, avoidance of company payments to candidates running for government posts or government officials, compliance with greatly accepted accounting principles and controls, maintenance of our reputation and avoidance of activities which might reflect adversely on the company, and integrity in dealing with the company's assets. Next slide, please. So I know y'all can't see this, but I just wanted to show you the SPJ's Code of Ethics, right? For SPJ's is the Society of Professional Journalism, and these are its poster for the Code of Ethics. Next slide, please. So I have, well, this is the Code of Ethics, but I shorten it down for y'all to see. And for journalism, this is the Code of Ethics for journalism. So journalists have to seek truth and report it. They would like the journalists to seek truth and report it. So ethical journalism should be accurate and fair. Journalists should be honest and courageous in gathering, reporting, and interpreting information. So journalists should take responsibility for the accuracy of their work, verify information before releasing it, use original sources whenever possible. Remember that neither speed nor format excuses inaccuracy. Provide context, take special care not to misinterpret or oversimplifying, promoting, previewing, or summarizing a story. Gather, update, and correct information throughout the life of a news story. Be cautious when making promises, but keep the promises they make. Identify sources clearly. The public is entitled to as much information as possible to judge the reliability, and motivations of sources. Next slide, please. So a journalist should be able to minimize the harm that they do. So journalists should balance the public's need for information against potential harm or discomfort. Pursuit of the news is not a license for arrogance or undue intrusiveness. Show comparison of those who may be affected, compassion, for those who may be affected by news coverage. Use heightened sensitivity when dealing with juveniles, victims of sex crimes, sources or subjects who are inexperienced or unable to give consent. Consider cultural differences in approach and treatment. You should be able to recognize that legal access to information differs from an ethical justification to publish or broadcast. You should realize that private people have a greater right to control information about themselves than public figures and others who seek power, influence, or attention. Weigh the consequences of publishing or broadcasting personal information. Next slide, please. They should be able to act independently. So journalists should avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived, disclose unavoidable conflicts. They should be able to refuse gifts, favors, fees, free travel, and special treatment, and avoid political and other outside activities that may compromise integrity, impartiality, or may damage credibility. They should be able to be wary of sources offering information for favors or money. Do not pay for access to news. Identify content provided by outside sources, whether paid or not. And they should be able to be accountable and transparent. So ethical journalism means taking responsibility for others' work and explaining one's decision to the public. So journalists should explain ethical choices and processes to audience, encourage a civil dialogue with the public about journalistic practices, coverage, and news content. Respond quickly to questions about accuracy, clarity, and fairness. Acknowledge mistakes and correct them promptly and permanently. Explain corrections and clarification carefully and clearly. They should be able to expose unethical conduct in journalism, including within their organization. So my question to you is, how well do you think that the Trinidad and Tobago journalists follow these code of ethics? Or do you think that they follow these code of ethics? Anybody?
Um, well, I've never really like seen any proof of or like read about or heard about um like any journalists, I guess, doing things that go against the code specifically or morally wrong. But I can imagine that there might be some people who wouldn't always like feel the need to follow the code of ethics. So it's possible that um there is probably like a good percentage of journalists that disregard it.
Mhm. Okay, thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
I think that most of the journalists follow a code of ethics in Trinidad. I know a few of them personally, but I would also say that the in terms of the unethical leadership, where they have like short time frames to get a story done, sometimes they would do things that are unethical. And like for instance, I remember a situation where when Ms. Prasad Visesa was the prime minister, she had given the journalists hampers and stuff, and the media houses told them to return it. And what they did was they did return it, but they all met at a car park and collected their hampers. So, you know, and a lot of journalists, well, who are my friends, they would say they missed when Kamala was in power because she used to give them a lot of stuff. When she have press conferences, they got a lot of stuff, who get houses and stuff. So I guess it's based on the situation that you are in. If you're not getting paid enough money, if your boss is tonguing you through to get things done by a certain time. I mean, I worked as a journalist for about 5 years, so I know sometimes it's hard to get a story. Sometimes you're trying to get the correct thing, and the person running you around, you're calling everywhere to get a phone number to contact somebody, and you're not getting through. So sometimes it can be hard, and then in Trinidad, it doesn't pay. The salary of a journalist is not high to say. So it leaves a lot away for them to be unethical.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Okay, next slide.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anika Budri, and I will be presenting the second part of our presentation. This section of our presentation focuses on, firstly, acting like a moral leader, becoming.
I just want to make sure if everybody heard that part.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
hearing it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you're not hearing it, please turn up your volume.
All right.
Okay.
A moral leader, and the three types of leadership models that are associated with servant leadership that can be utilized by anyone to evolve into an exceptional leader. As I begin the second part of our presentation, I would like to define what is a moral leader. Moral leadership refers to a leader's conduct that exemplifies strong moral values, which are essentially principles of right or wrong, selflessness, and integrity. Decision making in moral leadership is guided by an inherent ethical system and moral purpose. Some characteristics of a moral leader are: moral leaders respect everyone equally. Respect is a vital element of ethical responsibility. Moral leaders are open to communication. Leaders who have ethics need to excel at communication to ensure their organization is a place of trust and honesty. Moral leaders manage stress effectively and mediate fairly. Acting like a moral leader. People create a business for a multitude of reasons, such as following your passion, to achieve financial independence, filling a void in services provided to the population, or even to make a profit from an investment. However, to maintain a thriving business, leaders must not just look at it as a means of economic gain, but the values they portray. Being a moral leader does not necessarily mean you ignore the profit and loss, or production cost, and any other measurable facts, but you have to understand the importance of moral value, human meaning, quality, and higher purpose. Oprah Winfrey is a good example of a moral leader. She is quoted as saying, "Don't worry about being successful, but work towards being significant, and the success will follow." With Oprah's unique leadership skills in terms of compassion, ethics, inspiration, and justice, she has the ability to inspire people because she conforms to what is right and she fights for it. Even though she knows she would not be able to help everyone, she at least makes an effort. Despite the corporate realities of greed, competition, and the drive to achieve goals and profits, leaders such as Oprah act from moral values and encourages others to develop and use moral values in the workplace. Subsequently, with organizational change, it must begin within the minds of the employees. Once people change their way of thinking, they will start to do things differently. How should a moral leader act? In accordance with Daft 2008, a moral leader should have 10 parameters to build an environment that allows and encourages people to behave ethically and morally. I'll be listing a few. One must develop, articulate, and uphold high moral principles. Focus on what is right for the organization as well as all the people involved. Set the example you want others to live by. Be honest with yourself and others. Do the right thing in both your private and professional life, even if no one is looking. Leaders create organizational systems and policies that support ethical behavior, such as creating open door policies that encourage employees to talk about anything without fear, establishing clear ethical codes, rewarding ethical conduct, and showing zero tolerance for violations. Having understood who is a moral leader, how they should act, and what traits they should possess to be deemed actual moral leaders, we look at the two pictures presented on this slide, with the first picture being that of Tubal Uriah Buzz Butler, who was immortalized as the founder of the trade union movement in Trinidad and Tobago. Since 1919, working people were agitating and mobilizing for better wages, working conditions, And coupled with the return of soldiers from the West India Regiment and the rise of the cost of living, this culminated in the labor riots of 1937, led by Uriah Butler, which was the catalyst for the much needed change. From 1936 to 1937, Butler mobilized workers and held public meetings throughout the oil belt. In 1937, he was arrested and charged for inciting riots and with sedition, following his speech made to workers in Faizabad, for which he served 2 years in prison. In May 1939, he was released from jail, but in November he was arrested and detained on Nelson Island as a security risk under the defense regulations during World War II. He was released when the war was over in 1945. He continued his plight for social justice and served on the Legislative Council from 1950 to 1961. The second picture is that of Mr. Alan Stanford, who within the Caribbean was well known for being one of the biggest ambassadors and sponsors for T20 cricket. However, early in 2009, Stanford became the subject of several fraud investigations, and on February 17, 2009, was charged by the SEC with fraud and multiple violations of U.S. security laws for alleged massive ongoing fraud involving $8 billion in certificates of deposit. During a 6-week trial, it was found that Stanford repeatedly raided the bank he owned in Antigua, the Stanford International Bank, treating it as his personal ATM, purchasing multiple luxury homes, yachts, and as we know, bankrolled a $20 million cricket tournament, all with the millions of dollars from investors of more than 100 countries that was secretly funneled out to a Swiss bank account whilst he lied and created fake documents and financial reports to pacify investors and fool regulators. Of these two examples, we can see the clear definition of what a moral and immoral leader is.
Okay, so Anika didn't add this, but which one of the two is the moral leader? Anyone?
I would say Butler.
Okay. Why? Why I say that?
Um, he more fight for the rights of the oil field workers for better working conditions. I think Stanford, I think he more stole from his employees or some issue with him that landed him in jail for unethical reasons.
Okay. All right. That's a good reason. Okay. Anybody else?
Well, yeah, you're right. He did things in the interest of, um, well, I guess yeah, he did things in the interest of other persons. He tried to do the right thing. I guess, yeah, he tried to do what I would say something that was morally right. And well, the other guy, I think Stanford, well, he just he did things for himself, and not only that, things that would negatively affect lots of other people. So yeah,
That's good.
I think he's an immoral leader.
All right. Thank you guys. Okay, I'm gonna give back this to Anika now.
Becoming a moral leader. Leadership is not just a set of behaviors without a moral compass. All leadership models have a moral dimension in that they can be employed for good or ill. Leaders must choose whether to act selfishly and greedily in order to denigrate others, or in order to serve and motivate people to reach their maximum potential as employees and human beings. Moral leadership is about recognizing right from wrong and doing the right thing, pursuing the just, honest, good, and proper conduct in its application. The picture and quote in this slide is from one of the most moral leaders of all times, Mohandas Mahatma Gandhi, whose moral leadership traits have inspired some of the greatest leaders in history. He says, morality is the basis of things and truth is the substance of all morality. We'll be playing a short video to show his moral leadership styles.
Y'all seeing the YouTube video, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Moral leadership inspires individuals to be better than they were before they met the leader. Leaders are responsible for establishing a framework for the organization that will enhance and enrich members' lives, as viewed in the previous video of Mahatma Gandhi and his morally sound leadership. Specific psychological traits such as ego strength, self-confidence, and a perception of independence may help leaders to act morally in the face of resistance. Confidence is a critical condition for moral courage because it propels leaders beyond considering what is right to acting on their moral principles. Furthermore, leaders may cultivate these traits via their own hard effort. People can choose whether or not to behave morally. In this slide, I will be discussing Kohlberg's theory of moral development, which proposes that a leader's capacity to make moral choices is related to the individual's level of moral development. I'll be discussing these three levels, which are separated into two stages each. Level 1 is the pre-morality level. Stage 1 is the punishment and obedience orientation, where doing what is right because of fear of punishment. This stage is obedience and punishment oriented. For example, when a child chooses not to hit someone on the playground because they know they will get into trouble, thus protecting themselves by obeying the rules to avoid being punished. Now, stage 2, which is hedonistic orientation, doing what is right for personal gain, perhaps a reward, where right behavior is determined by whatever the individual believes to be in their best interests. For example, a child asks by a parent to do a chore, and they reply by asking, what would their reward be for completing the chore? Then the parent offers an incentive by giving an allowance. A leader who displays these tendencies are generally autocratic and use their position for personal gain. Level 2 is the conventional morality level. Stage 3, which is the interpersonal concordance orientation. This means doing what is right according to the majority to be a good boy or girl. During this stage, adherence to expectations of good behavior as defined by colleagues, family, friends, and society about the rules and norms are strict and fairness is seldom questioned. Corporate culture of right and wrong are adhered to even if the larger society deems the actions wrong, but the norm of the corporate majority states it is right. Employees attempt to obey the organizational norms instead of the societal ones. Often, when organizations do illegal transactions, the managers and employees are simply going along with the system they were indoctrinated into. For example, the ghost gangs that were prevalent in the European CPEP programs. Stage 4, law and order orientation, doing what is right because it is your duty and helps society. Because norms and conventions are necessary for the function of society, persons accept them without question. Rules are considered as being the same for everyone, and following rules by doing what one is supposed to do is seen as useful and significant. In stage 4, moral thinking goes beyond the requirement for individual acceptance that was seen in stage 3. If one person breaks the law, possibly everyone will. Therefore, there is a responsibility and a duty to obey laws and norms. The majority of active members of society are still in stage 4, where morality is still governed by an external influence. Level 3, which is the post-conventional morality. Stage 5, social contract or legalistic orientation. Doing what is right even if it is against the law because the law is too restrictive. Having many points of view, rights, and values is acknowledged as being unique to each individual or society. Laws are viewed as social contracts rather than strict edicts. Those that do not support universal welfare should be altered and is needed in order to achieve the greatest good for the largest number of people. This is accomplished by the majority rule and the unavoidable compromise. Theoretically, democratic government is built on stage 5 thinking. Stage 6, universal ethical principles orientation. Doing what is right because of our inner conscience, which has absorbed the principles of justice and equality and sacredness of life. The principles adopted are abstract rather than tangible, focusing on concepts such as equality, decency, or respect. People pick the ethical values they desire to follow, such as laws being based on justice, and when those ideals are violated, it entails a responsibility to disobey unjust laws. In this case, the individual acts because it is ethically correct to do so, rather than to escape punishment. It is in their best interests. It is anticipated. It is legal, or it was previously agreed upon. These internalized values become more important than the expectations of other people in the organization or community. A leader at this level is visionary, empowering, and committed to serving others and the higher cause. A great example of this is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Servant leadership. Much of today's leadership theory suggests that moral leadership enables followers to become leaders, ultimately maximizing their potential, rather than using a leadership position to control or constrain others. This, by any standards, is what servant leadership entails. However, to fully grasp this concept, it must be compared to other types of leaders. Within this slide, I'll be discussing the different styles of leadership. So in stage 1, we have the control leadership or the authoritarian leader who needs obedient subordinates. The control is centered on this leader. In stage 2, we have the participation or the participative leader who encourages team players. Stage 3, we have empowerment or stewardship leader which encourages self-responsible employees. Then we have stage 4, service or a servant leader who encourages an employee to be whole. The control is centered in the follower. Now, organizations were structured originally on the perception of a leader being in charge of subordinates, and the organization's success is dependent on the leader's control over the followers. In this first stage, subordinates are supposed to be passive, not think for themselves, and do what they are told. In the second stage of the continuum, involves subordinates participating more actively in their own work. The third stage, stewardship, signifies a substantial shift in thinking by shifting responsibility and power from leaders to followers. Servant leadership is a step beyond stewardship, in which leaders relinquish power and choose to serve their workforce. The focus of leadership transfers from leader to followers throughout the continuum. Authoritarian management. Traditionally, understanding of leadership is where a good manager is the one who directs, controls decision making, and announces them to the obedient subordinates who follow them. To an authoritarian manager, the stability and efficiency of the organization is tantamount to the needs of the subordinates, as they are not given any discretion on how they should perform their jobs. Authoritarian leadership mindset emphasizes a tight, top-down control, employee standardization, specialization, and management by impersonal measurement and analysis. Leaders in this type of management set the goals and strategies as they have all the power, purpose, and privilege to do so. Participant management. As of the 1980s, organizations have made a concerted effort to include employees' participation through suggestion programs, participation groups, and quality circles, with teamwork as an integral part of how work is done. However, the mindset of the leadership has not changed, as leaders of this model are the ones to finalize decisions, determine goals, and rewards. Some responsibilities for autonomous work was given to subordinates. However, leaders are still responsible for outcomes and acting as mentors who are responsible for their morale, emotional well-being, and performance, which could lead to subordinates being treated as if they cannot think for themselves. Stewardship. Stewardship believes that leaders are accountable to others as well as the organization without trying to be controlling. Stewardship is a drastic move from full autonomy of the leaders to empowering followers to have control of how they do their jobs, influence their goals, systems, and structures to become leaders themselves. It can be seen as an alternative to leadership, as the people doing the work, making the product, providing service to the customers are highlighted. There are four principles that form the structure of stewardship. Number one, reorient towards a partnership assumption. This is a shifting of power and control away from the former leaders to the core workers, who have the right to say no and are honest, having to neither hide information nor protect each other from the bad news. Leaders and followers are jointly responsible and accountable for defining vision, purpose, and their outcomes. Number two, localize decision and power subordinates. Decision-making power and authority would be where the core functions of the business are, as it incorporates the subordinates in executing the core functions of the organization, removing the concept that someone is simply paid to plan and manage the work of others. Number three, recognize and reward the value of labor. Stewardship incorporates a system that shows an employee the company redistributes the wealth by compensating core workers who make significant gains and exceptional contributions. Number 4, expect core workers and teams to build the organization. Workers who form the foundation of an organization define the goals, maintain the controls, create a nurturing environment, and adapt themselves to the changing world. Stewardship leaders help organizations thrive whilst guiding it without being domineering by utilizing the mental and physical assets of the followers who are encouraged to make significant, self-responsible contributions to the organization. Servant leadership is the flip of what leadership was originally meant to portray, as leaders generally utilize a power model with a power-reliant leader who commands and controls, with focus mainly placed on the leader, and the employees used as tools and customers viewed as challenges. Whereas a servant leader utilizes a servant-led model that inspires and equips its employees and are focused on all the people, with employees being viewed as resources and customers as valued allies. In the mind of a servant leader, their purpose is to serve as it enables people to grow and become capable of doing. Servant leadership emphasizes empowerment, participation, shared authority, building a community of trust, while prioritizing employees, customers, shareholders, and the general public. Servant leadership is a term coined by Robert Greenleaf, who developed 4 basic concepts of what is the servant leadership model and what it entails. 1. Put service before self-interest, where a conscious choice is made by leaders to use their gifts to create change and growth for others, as opposed to desiring former leadership positions to attain power and control. A servant leader calls for doing good and right for others, even if there is no financial redress. With this view, organizations exist as much to provide meaningful work to the persons as they exist to work for the organization. 2. Listen first, then affirm others. This leadership model does not have answers, so they ask the questions and listen carefully to fully understand the problems faced by others. This type of leader tries to understand what can be done to affirm the will of the group and how they can further it without imposing their own will upon them. By understanding others, the leader can contribute to the best course of action. 3. Inspire trust by being trustworthy. Servant leaders build trust by doing whatever they say they will do, whilst giving up control and focusing on the well-being of others. By making decisions to further the group rather than their own self-interest and allowing others to make decisions, fosters the growth of trust. Servant leaders give power, control, rewards, information, and recognition to gain trust that allows others to flourish. Number 4. Nourish others and help them become whole. Servant leaders care about each person as an individual and the unique potential each of us possesses that can have an impact on the world. They help others find the power to accept responsibilities and requires the openness to share in pain and difficulties of others. These types of leaders are willing to reveal their vulnerabilities and show they are human. We will now view a short video.
Hi, this film talks about servant leadership, what it is and why it makes sense. Servant leadership is a tried and tested leadership approach that's about creating a shift from managing for results to designing environments that create results. Robert Greenleaf coined the phrase servant leadership in the 1970s. It's a form of leadership that replaces self-interest with service to others. Servant leadership is about influence rather than power and control, focusing on others' strengths rather than weaknesses, listening rather than giving orders, and long-range benefits rather than short-term profits. Servant leaders demonstrate a range of 9 key attributes. The good news is that all of these can be developed. Listening, self-awareness, foresight, empathy, persuasion, stewardship, healing, conceptualization, and building a sense of community. Servant leadership is about transformation and future focus. And adopting its leadership principles complements agile ways of working really well. The nature of work in the workplace has changed drastically. Our leaders need to change too. In order to continue to maximize delivery and customer value, our leaders need to demonstrate an ability to adapt. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit, the top 3 emergent leadership requirements are ability to motivate, ability to work well across cultures and geographical boundaries, and ability to facilitate change. An effective servant leader would demonstrate these by role modeling collaboration, accountability, and demonstrating innovation, emphasizing the importance of embracing and applying new knowledge at an individual and team level, and encouraging novel approaches and ideas. New demands are being made of leaders at all levels. The world's leading lean and agile thinkers together articulate 8 core competencies that they believe will differentiate leaders of the future. And these are innovation, strategic, excitement, tactical, communication, production, consensual, and delegation. So, in summary, servant leadership is an attractive, effective, and proven approach that should be the choice for those interested in transformation at an individual and organizational level.
Servant leadership can be as simple as encouraging others to seek personal development and helping them understand the larger purpose to their work. Servant leaders work under the assumption that everyone has a moral duty to each other, and there is a higher purpose than acquiring more material goods for oneself. An organization faces major issues when good, intelligent, and vital people have the potential to lead, but do not or choose to serve a non-servant.
Okay, guys, so that was it for Nika's part. So moving on to courage. So I wanna get y'all brains kind of moving here, right? So I want y'all to keep this in your mind. So courage is both a moral and a practical matter for leaders. For today's organizations, things are constantly changing, and leaders thrive by solving problems through trial and error. They are creating the future by moving forward in the face of uncertainty, by taking chances, by acting with courage. Okay, so I'm gonna play a video for you now. Hold on.
I get asked very often, what are the most important characteristics of leadership? Vision, charisma, I know plenty of incredible leaders that aren't big Steve Jobs visionaries, they're just not. And I know some fantastic leaders who do not have charisma. They're quiet and super introverted, and they're just not that exciting to talk to, spend time with. When I say charisma, I mean the traditional definition of it, which is more about energy. I believe charisma is undying belief in something, and that they have in spades. But I think courage is the one thing that all great leaders have to have, because we are surrounded by overwhelming forces every day of our lives pushing us to play the finite game. You know, if you're a public company, the markets, all they want for their own selfish gain is for you to make short-term decisions. The pressures are overwhelming. If you're a numbers-driven person, the pressures are overwhelming. If you're in survival mode, the pressures are overwhelming. If you have a spouse who spends more money than you can make, the pressures are overwhelming. All the pressures around us, even the way we treat competition versus rivalry, like we feel like we have to win all the time. The pressures every day on us are absolutely overwhelming for us to be finite and to prioritize the short term over the long term, to prioritize the urgent over the important. And it takes unbelievable courage to put the important before the urgent. It takes unbelievable courage to resist all the pressures coming from selfish outside parties. It takes unbelievable pressure to do the right thing. So yeah, courage is it. Which begs the question, how do you get courage? I get
Okay, so we'll get to how to get courage in a while, but I want to get to the main part, which is, what is courage? And I'm not talking about Courage the dog, okay? Okay, I'm just using him as a reference. So, courage is the ability to step forward through fear. Okay? So, courage doesn't mean the absence of doubt or fear, but the ability to act in spite of them. As US Senator John McCain puts it, fear is the opportunity for courage, not the proof of cowardice. All right, so if there were no fear or doubt, courage would not be needed. It is natural and right for people to feel fear when real risk is involved, whether the risk be losing your life, losing your job, losing the acceptance of peers, or losing your reputation. But many fears are learned and prevent people from what they want. True leaders step through these learned fears to accept responsibility, take risks, make changes, speak their minds, and fight for what they believe. Y'all understood that? Everybody good? Y'all awake?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna move on to what courage means. So accepting responsibility, okay? Leaders make a real difference in the world when they are willing to step up and take personal responsibility. Courageous leaders create opportunities to make a difference in their organizations and communities. So I'm gonna read an example. One societal example is Barbara Jones, an ordinary 16-year-old who made an extraordinary difference during the civil rights movement in the South. Jones led of her segregated high school on a 2-week strike after a bus full of white students refused to pick her up. The NAACP stepped in and helped the young people sue for integrated school. So, leaders also demonstrate courage by openly taking responsibility for their failures and mistakes, rather than avoiding blame or shifting it to others. I have a next example. So, David Pottruck was fired as CEO of Charles Schwab, and he admits that he had to resist a strong urge to blame everyone else for the downfall. Yet, Pottruck found the courage to publicly accept responsibility for his mistakes rather than pointing the finger at others, which allowed him to reflect on the experience more calmly and moved ahead with his life and career. Now, admittedly, just to yourself, right? Everybody blames somebody for something they do wrong, and hello?
Yeah, at some point in life.
Yeah, well, yeah. Everybody did it at once. But what it takes courage to say that I'm wrong, right? You just it's easier to point fingers, but it takes courage. Okay, so I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on with a little exercise. After I'll explain courage means accepting responsibility and stuff like that. But I already did. Oops, sorry. So everybody had fears, right? Everybody has fears.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask.
Of course.
Hmm. Yeah, I heard you have a. So public speaking is a fear of mine, right? But I have courage to speak up and teach, right? So I want to hear some of your fears. Anybody?
I mean, it's probably off topic, but I can't swim.
You can't swim. Okay, would you ever have the courage to learn?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so anybody else?
Public speaking is also a fear of mine.
Yeah, it's a fear of many. But you know what? There's positivity. There's the light at the end of the tunnel, according to some people. So, anybody else want to share?
I have a fear of spiders.
You know, I kind of want to ask if you would have the courage to hold one, but
No.
you know, that would have been my answer to be honest. Okay, all right, I'll move on now. So, courage means non-conformity. Non-conformity. So, leadership. Leadership courage means going against the grain, breaking traditions, reducing boundaries, and initiating change. Leaders are willing to take the risk for a larger ethical purpose, and they encourage others to do so. So, for those of you who don't know what nonconformity is, it's the failure or refusal to conform to a prevailing rule or practice. Okay, and I'm gonna break down prevailing. So prevail means to prove more powerful or superior. So for example, it's hard for logic to prevail over emotion, right? So I'll hit you with the next example for conformity. So when Clive Walrose, I butchered that name, sorry, took over as president of Volkswagen AG's Americas division, the subsidiary was a mess with sludge sales and demoralized workforce. For many Volkswagen executives, it took like a situation called for a strong hand at the top. As a company, Volkswagen has long favored strict hierarchy and control. But Warlow had come to believe that style no longer worked so well. After years of climbing the corporate hierarchy, Warlow had the courage to risk his career by challenging the status quo, whereas area managers previously had to ask headquarters for permission to make even the smallest decision. Walro allowed them to approach their jobs in their own individual ways. If a manager wanted to cut back on advertising and use the money for bonuses, for example, he had freedom to do so, no questions asked. Walro also changed the relationship with the dealers rather than reprimanding, ridiculing, or terminating dealers who missed their sales targets. He would ask what they could learn from the situation that will enable them to do things better in the future. Volkswagen of America made an impressive comeback. thanks in large part to the courage of Willow showed in instituting a new style of leadership. Nevertheless, Volkswagen's top German executives remained wary of the more relaxed approach. According to Willow, I have empathy for what he does, one said, but sometimes I'm afraid business is tough. So, he had the courage to go against the grain and do what he believed was best for the company, even if it may not be the best for his own career. Okay? Moving on. Right. So, courage means pushing beyond the comfort zone. To take a chance and improve things means leaders have to push beyond their comfort zone. When people go beyond their comfort zone, they encounter an internal wall of fear. So everybody knows that dancing in public takes you out of your comfort zone if you're not accustomed with it, right? So what is something that takes you all out of your comfort zone?
Well, that used to be like doing presentations in class, like physically in front of your classmates. That's one for me.
For public speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had like a wall of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm gonna give an example, right? Dr. Stanley Milgram asked his first-year graduate students to board a crowded train and ask someone for a seat. Milgram's focus of interest soon shifted to the students themselves, as the seemingly simple assignment proved to be extremely difficult, even traumatic. So I don't know who said public speaking. All I'm saying is Ziana A. But it's a simple task, public speaking, right? But it's that fear that gets you, right?
Yeah.
So I have a next example. Well, not example, but people may encounter the internal wall of fear when about to ask somebody for a date, confront the boss, break off a relationship, launch an expensive project, or change careers. In this case, public speaking. So facing the internal wall of fear is when courage is needed most. So we need courage to do all of this, to face your fears. Okay? So courage means asking for what you want and saying what you think. Leaders have to speak out to influence others. Courage means speaking your mind even when you know others may disagree with you and may even deride you. Courage also means asking for what you want and setting boundaries. It is the ability to say no to unresponsible demands from others, as well as the ability to ask for what you want to help achieve the vision. Okay? I have a short video, another video.
You say on page 46, the pressure to be quiet, because that's what's happening. It's the silenced people, the people not speaking up. And we see this from Congress to our very own neighborhoods, right?
Oh, yes.
The pressure to be quiet, to let other people, the politicians, the neighbors, the experts, say how we feel about things is very effective. And then on page 54, you say, it's finding the courage to utter the first word of truth in public that takes all the strength we can muster. It's learning to say quietly, unequivocally, I think differently about that.
It's the most subversive thing you can do.
I think differently about that.
I think differently about that.
Yeah.
Just say it. That shouldn't take courage. That should be part of the soul of humanity, waiting to hear the insights of someone else's soul. But But you see how quickly we responded as a people to, we're going to win and win and win until you're sick of winning. We're not here to win. We're here to grow. We're here to develop. We're here to leave the world a better place when we go because we've been here. And you only do that through civil discourse.
And you only do that when everybody wins.
That's right.
Okay.
You say on page 46.
Right. Now that that's in your mind, I'll move on to courage means fighting for what you believe. So courage means fighting for valued outcomes that benefit the whole. So an example, I hope you all understand more like with these examples. So Kailash Satrathi, head of the South Asian Coalition on Child Servitude, receives regular threats and 2 of his co-workers have been killed. But Sairathi continues striving to free India's millions of children forced to work in bonded labor. He doesn't risk his life just for the thrill of it. He does so for a cause he deeply believes in, the dignity of all human beings. So taking risks that do not offer the possibility of valuable and ethical outcomes is at best foolish and worth evil, right? Courage doesn't mean doing battle to destroy the weak, feed one's ego, or harm others. It means doing what you believe is right, even when this goes against the status quo, and possibly opens you to failure and personal sacrifice. Okay? Everybody on the same page? We good? Any questions? Y'all awake?
None so far.
Okay. Okay. If you all fallen asleep, I have an activity for y'all. Okay? So, similar to what Rhonda did, we have mostly true, mostly false. But instead of adding up certain things, you're only going to be adding up mostly true. Okay? So as I go along, y'all could write down what you'll have your answers, mainly mostly true, mostly false, whichever one it is for each question. And then at the end, I'll ask for anybody to volunteer to see their answers, what they got, okay? So let's begin. I risk substantial personal loss to achieve the vision. Mostly true, mostly false. I take personal risk to defend my beliefs. I say no, even if I have a lot to lose. So that's our third one, right? The fourth one, I consciously link my actions to higher values. Number 5, I don't hesitate to act against the opinions and approval of others. Number 6, I quickly tell people the truth even when it's negative. Number 7, I feel relaxed most of the time. Number 8, I speak out against organizational injustice. Number 9, I stand up to the people if they make offensive remarks. And the last one, number 10, I act according to my conscience, even if it means I lose status and approval. Okay. So add up your points if it's mostly true, right? You're only using mostly true. Everybody finished, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll give you a couple more seconds if anybody's still, counting and stuff. Okay, so anybody wants to say how many they got? Like, what's their score?
I have like 8 trues, mostly trues.
Okay, so if you received a score of 7 or higher, you have real potential to act as a courageous leader, right? You can be a courageous leader.
Wow.
Anybody else? And if anybody got like a low score, don't feel too bad, all right? But a low score, like a score below 3, indicates that you avoid difficult issues or have not been in situations that challenge your moral leadership. All right, just don't feel too bad. There's nothing bad to be worried about, okay? So, how does courage apply to moral leadership? To practice moral leadership, leaders have to know themselves, understand their strengths and weaknesses, know what they stand for, and often be nonconformist. So a nonconformist is a person who doesn't conform to a generally accepted pattern of thought or action, okay? In addition, moral leadership means building relationships, which requires sharing yourself, listening, having a significant personal experiences with others, and qualities that frighten many people. Yet, finding emotional strength requires people to overcome their deepest fears and accept emotions as a source of strength rather than weakness. By getting close and doing what is best for others, sharing the good and bad, the pain and anger, as well as the success and joy, leaders bring out the best qualities in others. Okay. So, finding personal courage, right? Most of us have learned fears that limit our comfort zones and stand in the way of being our best and accomplishing our goals. We have been conditioned to follow those rules, not rock the boat, to go along with things we feel are wrong. Sorry, I could read. I was reading over the sentence. We have been conditioned to follow the rules, not rock the boat, to go along with things we feel are wrong so others will like and accept us. So how many times, it could be in the past, have you all just sit back and let everybody else do what well, basically what I'm trying to ask is what have you all ever let somebody influence you just because you don't want them to talk bad about you or not be a friend? Because I have a vivid memory, like in primary school, like I didn't want to get bullied, so I just used to go along with it even though I knew it was wrong. Anybody else had that experience?
For sure.
For sure. Only one person?
Yes, I've had that experience.
So anybody had like a similar experience? Or like that they would like to share? Going once, going twice. Okay, we sold. I'll move on. There are a number of ways people can unlock the courage within themselves, including committing to causes they believe in, connecting with others, welcoming failure as natural and beneficial parts of life, and harnessing anger. Yes, you heard that right, harnessing anger. So, sorry, something going wrong there. I don't know what happened. Okay, right. Sorry about that. I lost my page. So, opposing unethical conduct requires courage. So, whistleblowing. It's basically whistleblowing. For those of you who don't know what whistleblowing is, employees' disclosure of illegal, immoral, or unethical practices in the organization. So, choosing to act courageously means conflicting emotions. Whistleblowers may feel an ethical obligation to report the wrongdoing, but may also feel disloyal to their bosses and coworkers. Right, so we already talked about personal courage, but I have an example. We did personal, sorry, sir, my computer kind of, I don't know why the slides, it all over the place. So I apologize. I do apologize for that.
All right, try to continue as best as you can.
Sorry about that, everybody. So,
Okay.
unlocking personal courage, okay? Okay, so we're gonna unlock personal courage by believing in a higher purpose. Courage comes easily when we fight for something we really believe in. Leaders who have a strong emotional commitment to a larger vision or purpose find the courage to step through fear. So I have another example. Elenis Josetis co-founded Focus, Hope, as a food program to serve pregnant women, new mothers, and their children. Soon realizing that hunger wasn't just a symptom of a larger problem, she expanded the organization as a civil rights group to try to bridge the economic and racial divides. So, the higher purpose overshadows concerns about her own self-interest. The higher purpose overshadows concerns about her own interests. In businesses, organizations too, courage depends on belief of a higher vision. Y'all understood that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go in with anybody else like have questions? So y'all everybody fully understood belief in a higher purpose, right?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay. So unlocking personal courage by drawing strength from others. So caring about others and having support from others is a potent source of courage in a topsy-turvy world. Love is a strong ingredient of courage because it makes us willing to sacrifice. Consider a caring parent who will risk his or her own life to save a child. For y'all parents y'all who are parents, it also has teachers. Teachers would do stuff sometimes if they actually like what they're doing in jobs. They would put their own life at risk to save a child. For example, there's this lady that it had a tornado, and she actually used her body as a shield to cover those children, and she herself was pregnant, but she knew that there are many more children than her and her little baby. So that's courage. That took courage, right? So I have another short video.
You know, the pressures on us are overwhelming from Wall Street or our own egos or from internal incentive structures or our bosses, whatever it is. The pressures are overwhelming for us to play the finite game. And so how do you stand up to massive external pressure? Courage. And courage is something that comes from relationships. You know, it's external. A world-famous trapeze artist would never attempt a brand new death-defying act for the first time without a net. They would never do it. So why do we think that we could do something difficult without external support too? I've had the opportunity to meet real heroes, people who've risked their lives to save the lives of others with the belief that they were going to die, and they didn't. And when asked, why did you do it? They all say something similar, which is they would have done it for me. It's external. And so we have to take the time to foster and take care of people around us, to nurture our relationships, because when we're going to be doing something difficult, when we're going to be swimming upstream, when we're going to be innovating and doing something different, there are days we're going to doubt ourselves. There are days we're going to get knocked in our ass. There are days that storms are going to rise, and we have to have people who say, I got your back. You need to do this. We need you. The world needs this. Keep going. I believe in you, you know? And so courage comes from not only our willingness to do that for others, but then their willingness to do it for us. And if we commit ourselves to a just cause and we're willing to do those things, then, you know, the great thing is we take a lot of people with us and change the world for the better. And isn't that sort of the point of an infinite life? To leave this world in better shape than we found it, to leave the companies that we work for in better shape than when we better capable than they can do without us. You know, isn't that what it means to live an infinite life? That we can literally live on beyond our own lives.
Sorry about that, guys. Don't know what happened there. Okay. So moving on to the next one, unlocking personal courage by welcoming failure, sorry. According to Walt Disney, it's important to have a good hard failure when you're young. Accepting, even welcoming failure enables courage. Failure can play a creative role in work and in life because people and organizations can learn valuable lessons from things that go wrong. Leaders can redefine failure away from its negative associations and see it as an important first step towards success. Leaders know that failure can lead to success and that the pain of learning strengthens individuals and organizations. So an example would be Sharon McClough was hired for a top sales and planning position at a hot software startup, partly because she had started a business and failed. Company leaders liked the fact that she had been willing to take the risk associated with starting a business and then moved forward after the failure. Even people who invested in her business and lost money said they'd do it again. She tried and failed, and so what? Said one backer. The next time, my bet's on her. McClure believes that having hit rock bottom and survived has given her greater courage. Every time you pushed beyond your comfort zone, every time you fail and try again, you build psychological strength and courage. Okay. Unlocking personal courage by harnessing frustration and anger. So, anger and frustration, it can cause you to forget about fear. So, an example would be Nu Ribadu's courage in cracking down on oil smugglers and crook politicians. Death threats against Ribadu, head of the new Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, are common, but he is committed to ridding Nigeria and ultimately all of Africa of fraud and corruption. His determination comes partly from the frustration he felt as a student in the 1980s, as he watched a democratically elected government crumble due to rampant fraud, and the anger he still feels as he sees Nigeria's people suffer from an unethical and dysfunctional political system. People and organizations can harness their anger to deal with difficult situations when someone has to be fired for just cause. A superior may put off until incidents make her angry enough to step through the fear and act. Sometimes outrage over perceived injustice can give a mild-mannered person the courage to confront the boss head-on. In addition, getting mad at yourself may be the motivation to change. Anger in moderate amounts is a healthy emotion that provides energy to move on. Harness anger and use it appropriately. So, anybody had experiences where they didn't know how to use it inappropriately, appropriately? So, anybody?
Sorry, I had to step away for a second. Can you just repeat?
Up to which part you didn't hear?
Just the question.
Okay, so the question is, anybody had experiences where they harness the anger inappropriately, like they didn't know how to use it?
Well, I for sure could say that, yeah. Yes, for me. When I'm like being a teenager, and I guess sometimes even now in my adult life.
All right. So did it have a good outcome or a bad outcome?
In my teenage years, definitely bad outcomes. I'm trying to remember if if there's any point in time like now where it would have had good outcomes. I wouldn't say so, no.
So right. We all need to learn how to put that moderation into anger, right? It's a way of, yes, stepping through the situation and getting that courage, but also we still have that problem where we don't know how to appropriately use it, right? So it's that courage that helps us to get through that situation. So for example, a parent would need the courage to a parent would need the courage or the frustration to harness the frustration from when your child acts up, or a teacher, let's just say a teacher acts up and they're doing the wrong things, and you constantly give them warnings, and then it's like you're preventing yourself from actually putting them out the class or giving them licks. Okay, so when you bottle up all this anger and frustration, and you go in and burst and give them a bad licks, some bad blows, or like just put them out the class, tell them to leave. And
yes, that is true.
Right. So to sum up all of this, Courage is the ability to face any dangerous or painful situations, fearful situations. Courage can be physical or moral. Physical courage is when one can face any physical pain or fear. Moral courage is to do the right thing in every situation. So you'll understand the difference of how like courage affects morality.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point in time, I just want to say thank you for listening to our presentation. And yeah. I don't know if Rhonda has anything else to tell you guys, but I'm finished.
Just want to say thank you. Thank you for the patience. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so if anybody doesn't have any questions, so
All right, I'll stop the recording now.